That is all the time that remains on a fog-drowned runway in the Canary Islands, where the largest passenger aircraft ever built is about to begin its takeoff roll, while another one, invisible in the mist, is still taxiing straight toward it. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back 17 minutes to the afternoon of March 27th, 1977. This is the Countdown Archive. None of these airplanes were supposed to be here. Earlier that afternoon, at 15 minutes past 1, a bomb planted by a separatist group had exploded inside the terminal at Gran Canaria, the busiest airport in the Canary Islands, and the authorities, fearing a second device, had closed the entire field without warning. Every flight bound for Gran Canaria was turned away, toward a smaller airport on the neighboring island of Tenerife, Los Rodeos, a regional field with a single runway, a single parallel taxiway, and no ground radar at all. Within an hour, its modest apron was packed, wing to wing, with wide-body jets it was never designed to receive, and among them stood two Boeing 747s. KLM Flight 4805, a blue and white Dutch jumbo heading home to Amsterdam, and Pan Am Flight 1736, a silver American giant arriving from Los Angeles and New York. Remember them this way, the blue Dutch jet and the silver American. Their paths are about to cross. Los Rodeos sits more than 2,000 feet above sea level, on a plateau where bad weather does not roll in from the sea. It falls directly from the sky. As the afternoon wore on, low clouds began drifting across the airfield itself, thick banks of fog sliding over the runway in slow waves, swallowing the control tower, the taxiway, and the parked aircraft one after another, until the controllers could no longer see the planes they were guiding, and the pilots could no longer see each other. From that moment on, every movement on that runway depended on a single fragile thing: the radio. When Gran Canaria finally reopened, the silver American was ready to leave almost immediately, but it could not, because the Dutch jet stood parked directly in its path, and its captain had made a decision that would quietly seal the fate of both aircraft. Rather than refuel later that evening, he chose to take on full tanks now to save time on the return rotation to Amsterdam. The refueling took 35 minutes. 35 minutes, during which the fog thickened from a nuisance into a wall, and during which tens of thousands of liters of jet fuel settled into the Dutch jet's wings. Its captain, Jacob van Zanten, was not a man anyone questioned lightly. He was the head of KLM's flight training program, the airline's most senior instructor, the face of its safety advertisements. With the apron gridlocked, the tower had only one option left: send the departing aircraft taxiing down the active runway itself. Van Zanten's blue Dutch jet went first, rolling slowly through the murk toward the far end, where it would turn 180 degrees and face back the way it had come. The silver American followed behind it, on the same runway, in the same fog, with instructions to leave at the third exit and wait for the Dutch jet to depart. But the exits were unmarked and shrouded in gray, and in visibility of barely a few hundred meters, Captain Grubbs and his American crew crept forward, counting turnoffs they could hardly see, searching for a third exit they would never reach in time. At the end of the runway, the Dutch jet completed its turn and stood waiting, engines idling, lined up on a center line that vanished into the fog within seconds. Inside its cockpit, the atmosphere had tightened, because the crew was approaching the legal limit of its duty time, and beyond that limit, the flight would have to be canceled outright, stranding the aircraft, the passengers, and the airline's schedule on a fog-bound island. The first officer began reading back the departure clearance, the route they were to fly after takeoff. And before that readback was even finished, the throttles started moving forward under the captain's hand. "We're going," he said. What happened next lasted only a handful of seconds. The tower answered the readback with the word, "Okay," and then added, "Stand by for takeoff. I will call you." At that precise instant, the American crew keyed their own microphone to warn that they were still taxiing down the runway. The two transmissions collided on the same frequency and canceled each other into a shriek of static. And inside the Dutch cockpit, the only word that survived the noise was the one that matched the captain's expectation. Okay. One last line of defense remained. The Dutch jet's own flight engineer, who asked quietly, "Is he not clear, that Pan American?" The captain's answer was emphatic. "Oh yes." The Dutch jet was now accelerating through the fog, heavy with fuel, racing toward an aircraft its pilots could not see. In the American cockpit, Captain Victor Grubbs saw a pair of landing lights emerge from the mist, growing brighter where nothing should have been moving at all. "There he is," he shouted. "Look at him, he's coming." He slammed the throttles forward and swung the silver giant desperately toward the grass. In the Dutch cockpit, Van Zanten saw the shape ahead and hauled back on the controls, dragging his machine into the air so steeply that its tail struck the runway in a trail of sparks. And it almost worked. The nose and the landing gear cleared the American, but the engines and the belly did not. At 5:06 in the evening, the two largest passenger aircraft of their era met on the runway, and the fog above Los Rodeos turned orange. All 248 people aboard the KLM died. The full tanks its captain had ordered filled left no chance to anyone. Aboard the Pan Am, 335 people were killed, and 61 escaped through the torn fuselage before the fire claimed the rest of the aircraft. 583 lives. To this day, the deadliest accident in the history of aviation. And at its center stood an almost unbearable fact. The man who had begun a takeoff without clearance was the very man his airline would have chosen to investigate it. Out of the wreckage at Tenerife came a revolution. The word takeoff was stripped from everyday radio use and reserved for the one clearance that truly matters. Standard phraseology became law across the world's cockpits and towers. And a new doctrine, crew resource management, taught every junior officer that rank ends where safety begins. That a flight engineer's quiet question must be enough to stop a legend's hands on the throttles. The deadliest accident in aviation history became its greatest teacher. This has been the Countdown Archive. The archive holds more hours like this one, minute by minute.